It's very much a juggling act between management, ecosystems, landowners, governing bodies, finding a balance of what's acceptable in the area, what people deem safe as well. There's a lot of politics around wild boar. My name is Warren Broad. I am a full-time deer and wild boar manager based in Gloucestershire and surrounding counties, and I'm also part of the Deerbox Wild Sustainable Venison Company. We provide deer boxes in two halves. We have the deer management aspect, which is all about sustainable management to improve woodlands and ecosystems. We manage a reasonable size acreage over a couple of properties in the Forest of Dean to manage and maintain the numbers of boar. There's a lot of sort of sensitivity around wild boar in the UK. You know, they haven't been here for a long time, although a native species. They've sort of come back in a few areas. There's very conflicting interests from landowners and people that sort of enjoy seeing the boar, others that are not so keen to see the boar, shall we say. Wild boar in the UK, there are only a few pockets of them now. The areas where numbers are substantial or growing, particularly where we are in the Forest of Dean, a lot of the wild boar live on sort of Crown-owned land, but obviously it's all public woodland, people can access it, they can walk around. We are there to try and keep everyone happy, do what's correct for the landowners, the land itself, and obviously the boar.
My name's Tim Howarth. I manage the deer and wild boar on behalf of Warren Broad on this property in the Forest of Dean. I've always had a keen interest on the boar, their ways and sort of how they go about things. But it's also, you know, in terms of management, it's looking at impact to the woodlands, impact to other species, and just make sure, again, it's balancing, limiting damage, whether it's lowering numbers or keeping the numbers as they are, because we're finding that it is the right balance for the habitat and the environment we're in. Health and safety of the boar, typically shy creatures. However, where you've got to start sort of looking at signs, the boar will give you signs and time to realise that they're not going to back off, and usually you're in those sort of scenarios where you've got sows protecting young. So things like walking your dog off lead as the dog wanders around, the last thing you want is the dog coming across a large sow with young uns. She will protect those at all costs, and the same goes with you walking around. Be careful where you're walking, and if you do come across boar, just give them some space. That's all they ask. And if they're not backing off, just unfortunately, you may have to turn around and go back on yourself and go round.
One of the most notable things for wild boar is obviously they like to turn their nose into anything and uproot it. There's quite a bit of good that the rooting of boar can do. They are known for spreading seeds and dispersing seeds. However, if they just done that in areas where we wanted sort of rewilding and natural growth to come through and, you know, new seeds and new flowers, great, but they don't know the difference between doing that and going uprooting 20 new cherry trees that the forest has just planted. If you sort of allow the population to carry and get out of control, then obviously they can have a detrimental effect. Their impact can be too strong and it completely sort of levels any progress with the sort of ecosystem and the flora. We're in a heavily wooded area. We're a few metres off a forestry track, and we've got some lovely spring daffodils coming through. The pigs favour this for an area of rooting. Each year they are rooting the ground up, upturning the soil, and they are spreading the seeds further, so we're starting to get daffodils develop off the track inside the woods. Instances like this, they can be very good for dispersing seeds. Some seeds they eat as well. Obviously what they eat at some point is going to come out the other end. Some of them, once they've gone through that digestive system, they're still fine when they come out the other end. They're dispersing those seeds into the woodland as well. So they do help, like the jaybird does, very much move seeds around. At the minute, we're in a new tree plantation that the forestry team here have been undertaking. Thankfully, they've put the right size tree yards on. They've got good protection around the trees, but what you can see, the boar have come down the rows of the trees and rooted all along the soil where the works have been done. Now, if these trees hadn't been protected properly, there's a high chance that those boar could have quite easily uprooted those. So the money that's been spent, the effort's been put in to try and plant this new piece of woodland, is quite quickly ruined by a couple of boar just doing what they naturally do, coming along, rooting everything up. So it's again, making sure you're putting the correct protection in place, monitoring the boar, hopefully trying to, you know, keep them out of the area where you can. Anywhere a boar can potentially cause conflict with something else that's either protected or work that's going on would be classed as a bit of a sensitive area. So, you know, it's your sort of duty of care to look after that. We are sat on what I would class as classic boar rooting. This is, as you can see by the sort of deader pieces of grass, it's not recent, this was done a couple of months ago, but it's just highlighting the sort of damage is the term that's used, you know, that they're doing to pasture land. It could be anything from grub seeds, just the grass seed, leather jackets, anything like that. There's no, someone else might actually be able to tell me if there's a particular reason. They didn't touch this field at all last year. We've not planted new grass seed in it. We've not altered, we've not put any extensive amount of fertiliser on it. Yet this year, they've decided this is the one that they wanted to turn over. We are all of 150 metres from a woodland edge, a very deep valley, dense in bracken and cover. You know, it's very easy for the pigs to go unnoticed in there, and it's also very easy for them to push through that fence and pop into the field for an evening or two, as we can see here.
Managing them is tricky. It's usually long nights or long hours, usually in the cold, wet, miserable weather. No set patterns with the boar. You can find them up the road, 2 minutes up the road tonight, and you'll find them 5 miles on the other side of the estate tomorrow.
In our country, wild boar don't have a closed season. They are not classed as a game animal in the UK, in England, and therefore the government say we're not putting a closed season on them. That obviously can be quite a delicate subject because the anatomy of animals, at some point they are breeding, they are carrying young, they have got dependents. So from a management point of view, we have to be very careful about when we are shooting, particularly your mature, your matriarch or your breeding sows. This time of year, we're in March, very, very heavily pregnant sows. If they're not pregnant, they probably led in a nest somewhere at the moment with their new humbugs, as we call them. So if you've gone out to manage or shoot, you know, that is what we do, harvest an animal, and you don't know what you're shooting, and you shoot a mature lactating sow, you've left potentially 6 or 7 dependent young somewhere with no mother to return to them. Again, it's about that balance of shooting the right ones at the right time, not causing any, and the key is unnecessary suffering. It's supposed to be quick, humane, efficient. Shooting a lactating sow and leaving dependent young is not ethical in any way, shape or form.
This would be sort of one of our methods of hides, viewing points for boar and boar management. For example, this one's sort of what we call the low box. Luckily we've got a roof on there, so you can actually get in there on rainy days, cold days, whatever. Nice large field of view for the windows, and what we consider as a really important criteria will be safe backstop for any shots that are taken. So you've got a nice big green grass bank in the distance for any bullet stops if we need. Another of our sort of high seat setups. This will be what we call a lean-to high seat, so we're actually using the tree behind to upright the seat. It gives us an elevated position to the area we're looking at. If you get the wind right, you out the wind, as in you won't get smelt by the animals that you're looking for or looking at. Elevated position when it comes to potentially taking a shot, you're shooting back down into the ground rather than shooting sort of flat and with no safe backstop. This would be sort of one of the basic sort of camera trap system we use, or trail cams as some others may call it. These spots is what, obviously we monitor them through the camera trap or the trail cam. With the boar it's difficult because there's no real patterns with them coming and going, but sometimes you can get them visiting 2-3 days on the bounce, daytime or nighttime. So it's usually good that if you start establishing that pattern, it might be worth just visiting your eye seat and actually casting an eye yourself on what's coming and going rather than just relying on the trail cam. In night time, I probably would start stalking this time of night, so your 5:30, and then potentially finish my stalk into one of the high seats we've visited and seen, and potentially target the hotter sort of areas that we've discussed with potentially forestry guys or other knowledge from trail cameras and camera traps. We need to keep that communication between all parties on the estate. So I will sort of speak closely to the forestry team, sort of things where they're planting, where they're harvesting, and any signs that they have noticed. So their knowledge is as beneficial for me in carrying boar management as possible, because I can then sort of liaise with them, discuss with them, and target those areas that they're either going to plant young trees or they're harvesting, and ideally having the boar around is not ideal.
My advice to anyone who's trying to manage boar would be think sensibly about what you're trying to harvest and what you're trying to remove from the ground. Engage with the ecologist, engage with the foresters, engage with the farmers, identify problem areas, identify reoccurring issues, see what can be done. Look at the broad spectrum of boar management as opposed to just going out and pulling the trigger.